Hi again, everybody. This is Jason Hanford from Chartwell Law. We're coming to you today to do another video on an emerging issue in the legal industry, something that's affecting all of us. We appreciate all the feedback we've gotten on our videos so far. As usual, if you have any feedback, you can leave comments on our social media pages. You can send us an email. If you're seeing this video, you're probably either on our website or on one of our pages, or you're viewing it through an email. So feel free to respond back with any questions that you might have about this or any other topic. It's been a couple months since we started doing these, so thank you for watching. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for responding to us. We hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. It's been a wild time, but we're going to revisit today the COVID-19 topic. We've gone away with it a little bit in recent videos, talked about a little bit more obscure but equally important Pennsylvania workers' compensation topics. Now we're going to circle back to a little bit of a broader picture of COVID-19. So with me today is my partner from our Harrisburg office, a recent Bloomberg author and a very highly skilled workers' compensation attorney in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, I believe, John Spadea. John, can you say hi to everybody?
Hello, everyone. Jason, thank you for the very kind words. Excited to share this topic today, frankly, because it has the potential to affect everyone, not just those practicing in Pennsylvania. Really, there are broad implications for everyone dealing with a COVID-19 claim across the nation. So with that, I'll just kick things off with the main point of the article I wrote about the Safeguarding America's First Responders Act. A mouthful there, but I'm just going to refer to it as SAFRA. One of the biggest issues from a evidentiary litigation standpoint on these COVID cases is really proving when and where you contracted the disease. And in a lot of cases, it's very difficult, if not impossible. By the nature of the disease, it can stay dormant and asymptomatic for a number of days. And especially now that states are in the process of attempting to reopen, I guess is how I'll describe it, it can be very hard to tell whether or not the disease was contracted at work or from a grocery store, gas station, bar, restaurant, anything of that nature. And that's really where this SAFRA bill from the Senate comes in. What it does basically creates a presumption. Yeah. It says that if you have the disease and you are a first responder, you are presumed to have a work-related injury, entitling you to benefits under this federal program called the Public First Responders Safety Benefit Officer Program. That presumption is very strong, and if it is just a disability, there is no way to overcome it. Basically, you prove you're working between the requisite dates, the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and if you have the disease, you are entitled to benefits. If you tragically succumb to the disease and die, you can overcome that presumption, but only with direct and proximate evidence that the disease was contracted somewhere else.
John, just a couple questions if I could jump in. I think you already mentioned this is a federal law, not a state law. It's a federal law?
Yes, yeah. It's a federal law. It's a federal program, and oddly enough, it's really limited in scope. This public safety officers program only has, I think, on the number of about 300 to 600 claims per year. Frankly, most attorneys, most practitioners, when it comes to those dealing with benefit programs, workers' compensation, things of that nature, have never heard of it. The issue, and why I think everyone needs to know about it, is the concept that it may preempt state workers' compensation laws. Federal preemption is a very complex body of law. It has, I think, one of the most well-developed Supreme Court jurisprudence histories behind it, and we could spend literally hours talking about it, but I won't bore everyone here, and I'll just get down to the nitty-gritty. Basically, the concept of preemption says that if there's a federal law and a state law, and they both cover the same topic, the federal law wins. It controls, it quote unquote preempts, it supersedes, it is the operative law. And so there's a question that arises if this SAFRA bill passes into law, whether or not that presumption that this is a work-related contraction of the disease supersedes the state laws and operates to create this presumption nationwide. And that's why I think people need to keep this on their radar.
Just to take a brief step back, John, I don't think you mentioned, where is this bill in the legislative process? Is it something that's already passed the Senate? Has it been signed by the president? Has it been moved into law? Where is it in the legislative process?
Yeah, great question. It is a Senate bill. It passed through the Senate with remarkably pretty broad bipartisan support. I believe it was sponsored by Senator Grassley, had both Republican and Democratic support behind it. It is currently tabled in the House, so it is before the House of Representatives. With that said, there is a similar House bill with similar presumptive language that was put forward in the HEROES Act, which was effectively the round 4 stimulus package being discussed. So while the law itself is not in effect, we have both versions passed by the House and another version passed by the Senate that do the same thing. And because it has bipartisan support, I think it is, I won't guess. I think I'll say that it's a very strong possibility that it could be included if there is another round of stimulus passed by Congress and signed into law.
John, you mentioned the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program. I practice disability law in Pennsylvania. I've never heard of it. Is that a program that manages payment of benefits by the employer or someone in the state? Or is that a program where the applicant applies to receive benefits directly from the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program?
Yeah, another good question. This is a federal program. It has federal funding, and in many cases, it is a benefit that is over and above, in addition to workers' compensation benefits, insurance policies, things of that nature. As I said, it really only applies in limited cases where a first responder, a firefighter, a police officer, in some cases chaplains, are injured while in the quote-unquote line of duty. There are other exceptions, but it is a relatively small benefit program on the national scale. With that said, and why I think there's an important similarity here, is that both this federal program and state workers' compensation laws, they operate to reach the same goal. They're trying to compensate individuals who are hurt at work. In one case, first responders in the line of duty, and in other cases, all workers who are hurt in the course and scope. In the case of COVID situations, what we're seeing, or what you would expect, first responders are oftentimes the most affected by the COVID disease. Obviously, there are other classes of workers you hear about on the news, but I believe that a lot of the claims, a lot of the individuals that would be filing workers' compensation claims for COVID are coming from this same pool of workers, i.e. firefighters, emergency medical providers, police officers, things of that nature.
So John, let's take Pennsylvania as an example. Obviously, I think most people viewing this video are probably aware that different states are doing different things with regard to COVID. I know Pennsylvania already passed a bill with regard to COVID presumptions for first responders, specifically heart and lung type thing, not for all workers. When we talk about preemption, do we mean that the first responders in Pennsylvania would potentially go to this federal program instead, or would it be in addition to what they're entitled to from the state benefit package?
I think the concern is really twofold. One, first responders, if they apply and they qualify under the federal program, they would be entitled to those benefits. The preemption issue comes in to whether or not we apply that presumption to the state workers' compensation claims as well. You mentioned Pennsylvania, and if there's a similar presumption, then the language would control or would be controlled by the federal program. Even if there is similar language, the federal program arguably has much broader language, at least that I'm aware of, in that the presumption can't be overcome unless there are the cases dealing with death and unless there is proximate direct evidence that the disease came from somewhere other than work. So to answer your question, yes, this is a benefit available above and beyond workers' comp, but the concern is that if it preempts under federal law, then that presumption applies to workers' compensation cases as well.
So in that situation, even where a state legislature already passed a presumption that they thought they crafted specifically to a certain population of employees, if the preemption holds, if the federal preemption holds, that state presumption would be read in a more expanded nature, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Arguably, I think there's a very credible position to take that both the federal and the state law are trying to accomplish the same goal. And in that case, without getting into boring minutia of federal preemption law, the federal law would control and the broader language would be the one you have to use.
And is the House bill using similar broadened language as the Senate bill?
Yeah. It's both of them are crafted similarly in that when it comes to disability, i.e. all injuries that don't end in death, it's an irrebuttable presumption. If you are working in this state and you are one of these workers and you have the disease, that is a work injury entitling you to benefits. And as I said, in cases of death, you can challenge that presumption, but again, it effectively flips the burden, places it back on now what would be the employer or the insurance carrier to prove almost a negative that you didn't get this at work. And then all of the difficulties that the claimants have, they're the same difficulties now that the defendant would have proving where this disease was or was not contracted.
Any idea when the next movement's going to be on this? I know in Pennsylvania there was talk about expanded presumptions for all workers, and that seems to, frankly, have leveled off a little bit. Obviously, this is a federal discussion. Any idea what the House and the Senate are?
It's tough to say. I know that there has been broadly talk of a fourth round of stimulus coming towards the end of July after recess. I don't believe a federal preemption or federal presumption, law is going to pass as a standalone. If this passes, it's going to be part of a larger package. With that said, I do think it's going to be a popular position to take for a politician because it is an attractive bill, which on its head would provide a great benefit to first responders. And again, I'm noting that it had bipartisan support and already passed the Senate. So I think this is something we want to keep an eye on as talks resume here pretty seriously for another round of stimulus coming through both the House and the Senate. And I think we're looking towards the end of July.
Yeah, and I think, depending on what state you're in, it might either relieve your state lawmakers of whatever angst they were going through and deciding how to do these presumptions for first responders, or it might, as we say, it might expand and change what the state lawmakers thought they had already settled with legislation that's already passed. So it'll be interesting to see what language comes through in a final federal bill and how that compares to, each of your individual states out there that may or may not have their own state rules in place already for COVID-19. John, is there anything else with regard to SAFRA, the pending legislation, federal legislation, or this topic that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to yet?
Just one final point. You kind of touched on it, Jason. Even if this federal law doesn't get passed, states oftentimes will look to federal legislation as a model. So this is something that, even if you're not practicing in Pennsylvania or wherever your state is in their legislative mixture, it's important to keep an eye on this because oftentimes state legislators will look to the federal law and kind of cherry pick legislation because, as you said, the federal legislators have done the hard work for them. So even if it doesn't pass federally, I think it's still important to monitor these types of presumptions in your own individual states.
And John, just the fabled question that I don't know the answer to, that I don't know if you know the answer to, but I think it's an interesting discussion point because I've seen this in the state laws as well. Do you know if either of the federal laws specifically reference COVID-19 or if they talk generally about, communicable diseases, pandemic type things? Because I've seen some of the state laws specifically talk about COVID-19, and the concern is well, if this comes up in 5 years and it's a different variety of a horrible pandemic, then we'll have to do this all over again. Do you know if there's much specificity in the federal laws?
Yeah, both federal laws are pinpoint specific to COVID-19. They even in their purpose statements describe the difficulties of establishing a COVID-19 case. So to that end, no, it's not going to expand beyond COVID-19. With that said, it is not in effect yet. There could be tinkering that's done to kind of plan ahead, so to speak. But yeah, to answer your question, this deals specifically at the federal level with COVID-19 and nothing else.
Well, hopefully, and speaking on behalf of John and myself and everybody in the world, hopefully we don't have another COVID type situation in 5 years or in 100 years. So hopefully that specificity is perfect and we never have to deal with this again. But it is an interesting issue. I think it's something that a lot of people aren't aware of right now. And I do think if the federal law passes, that it could have, pretty significant repercussions for the states, whether they've dealt with this issue already or not. So, John, I want to thank you for your time. Obviously, John's pretty well skilled and pretty well educated on this topic. He wrote a great article that was circulated by the firm and also published on Bloomberg. So if you have any questions about this federal legislation, COVID-19 legislation, I strongly recommend that you reach out to John by phone or by email, or maybe he's on Twitter, I don't know. If you have any general questions, you're welcome to go to our website, chartwelllaw.com, look up the two of us or look up somebody who looks smarter and reach out to them. We're always happy to take on hypothetical questions or maybe not so hypothetical questions. So, John, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, Jason, thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everybody else for tuning in, and we'll probably talk to you in the next couple weeks, pretty soon. Stay safe, stay healthy. Take care, everybody.